So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about the life-changing power, isn't this beautiful, of doing just a little, otherwise known as how drops create canyons.
And how books get written.
Exactly.
And how very daunting tasks get done.
How daunting tasks get done, and how do they get done?
A little by little.
A little at a time. So it is a pleasure to welcome all of you who might be newcomers. I see a whole bunch of names on our list of attendees, and I want to thank you for coming. Many of the names I don't recognize. So if you're new to Napkin Academy or these conversations, I welcome you. And if you are someone who's been with us for a while, and I see many, many familiar names as well, welcome back, friends. So very quickly, I am Dan, and I am joined by one of my favorite people in the whole world, the incredible author and communications professional, Dushka Zapata. And Dushka, I am going to talk you up just for a second, but then I'm going to ask you to kind of undo everything that I share and just make it real for us. Is that okay?
Yes, I don't know what that means, but I will see what I can come up with.
Okay, well, for those of you who've been on the Napkin Academy before, some of you may have met Dushka. If not, I just want to introduce Dushka. She and I met virtually a couple of years ago and have done a number of projects together. And as we will talk to you, we've actually done a number of books together. And the reason why that's interesting is Dushka is an incredibly prolific author. She's also a communications VP in the technology sector as a career. But in addition, and what makes Dushka pretty remarkable is not only is she incredibly well known in the communications community, but also on Quora and in people who are interested in relationships and how to take care of ourselves and each other. And so in that regard, Dushka has 275,000 followers daily on Quora.com, if you're familiar, where she has been read more than 250 million times. And how many essays have you now written, Dushka, on Quora?
I would say about 9,000.
Say that number again?
But why don't you ask me how? How did I write 9,000?
And how did you, Dushka, perfect segue, how did you write 9,000 essays?
A little at a time, Dan.
Perfect. And so I also am showing on the screen, these are the 14 books, but now as of today, it's 15 that Dushka has created. And I wanted to point out from my own selfish perspective that these last 3 down here, The Love of Your Life Is You, Demote Yourself, and For All I Know, I have had an opportunity to illustrate for Dushka. So with that, I'm just going to talk about the agenda, Dushka, and then I'm going to stop talking and ask you a bunch of questions. How's that sound?
Actually, Dan, I would love it if you introduced yourself and if you talked a little bit about Napkin Academy, because I know there's some people on the call that don't know you or Napkin Academy.
Wow. Well, thank you. Yes, Dushka, thank you for that. So my name is Dan. I'm the author of 6 books on the power of visual communication and clear communications. Perhaps the most known of them is a book called The Back of the Napkin, which is now celebrating its 12th year in print. And it helped me really codify and clarify the process that I used to bring clarity of communications through drawing into the business and organizational world. And then about a decade ago, with the assistance of Debbie, who's also on the phone with us, launched the Napkin Academy to help get those lessons on how to visually communicate and really unleash the power of our visual supermind to help us clarify our thinking and share it with others. I launched Napkin Academy. And the Napkin Academy, we get together every month. I will talk a little bit more at the end if any of you would like to join that, where we have conversations about how to be creative. And I walk people through my own lessons and then open it up to let other members of our academy share the lessons that they have and the work that they've been doing. And we learn a lot and we have a lot of fun.
Dan, what is visual strategy?
Visual strategy. I love this, Dushka. Thank you. Visual strategy. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to, visual strategy is being able to think really, really clearly and really comprehensively, perhaps by often using fewer words and replacing those words with the power of simple drawings. And so what we find is there's a lot of scientific research behind this, some of which I've done myself and a lot of which I've promoted, around helping people realize that we are actually often smarter than we think, many of us, and more capable than we think in expressing ourselves when we learn to unleash the power of our visual mind, which simply means learning how to draw to share our ideas. Does that make sense, Dushka?
Is that how you draw my answers?
Wow. It is actually how I draw your answers. And I want to talk a little bit about how your writing is, although incredibly verbal, it's words. I also find your writing to be remarkably visual, and it's keying off a lot of the visual analogies that you put into your work, many of which we're going to see today as we go through the rest of our time, that trigger things in my mind that become visuals. So Dushka, hold that thought. I want to make a quick introduction, and then I'm going to ask you some questions. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the way that our agenda is going to work for all of us is we're going to break today's session essentially up into 3 parts. This first one, which Dushka, you've already started to guide us into, is how we can be creative by little bits. Then we're going to pivot a little bit and talk about, interestingly, relationships and a new book. And then we want to leave lots of time at the end for those of you who are joining us if you have questions or other things that you'd like us to dive into. What's on your mind? And Dushka and I will walk through it. How's that sound, Dushka?
That sounds great to me. I already have a lot of things that are going to mess up this agenda.
I love it. So I'm going to start. And here's the first question. Can I ask you a question now? And we'll go back and forth.
Please do.
Okay. So part 1, creativity in little bits. Dushka, here's the real question I have for you. Why do you think creativity is even important? Let's just start there.
I think that creativity is, for the person doing the creation, a window into who we really are. I think it is, when I am writing, which is the way that I know how to create, it is the time that I feel closest to myself, where I'm the clearest on who I am and what I want. And I believe that if we were all more tapped to, I think everyone is creative. I think we're creative in different ways. Some of us write, some of us paint, like the painting behind you. Some of us draw, some of us bake. Whatever the mode of expression is, I think that it puts us in touch with ourselves.
I would agree with you completely. And I know when we've had this conversation before, sometimes you've even expressed the idea that perhaps one of a couple of the greatest things that we can do as people, you believe, is to create. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think we all, I don't think that there's like a general meaning of life. I think we all have to come up with what our meaning of life is. And my answer to the meaning of my life is twofold. I think we're here to connect with others. I think connection is the meaning of life. And I think that we're here to create something.
And we're going to talk about both those. Connection by way of relationships, for example.
Yeah.
Exactly. So tell us a little bit. You started to allude to this. You have created 14, now 15 books, 9,000 essays, massive amount of thought, a tremendous amount of influence, a huge following. Tell us a little bit about the idea of doing that a little at a time. What are we even talking about when we say that drops make canyons? What does that even mean?
A few years ago, I decided that most of our life is output. Like, we talk to people and we do things for people and we love people, and everything is output. And I decided that I needed to begin the day by doing something for myself so that my output would be better. I was like, I need to just organize myself emotionally and do something that feeds me so that I can increase the chances of what I'm putting out being the best of me that I can. And I realized that there was a piece of time before the day fully hit me that would only belong to me. So that if I could get up early in the morning and dedicate that time to doing something that fed me, there would be something better of me to give to others, to work and to my relationships and to all of the things that we give ourselves to. So I get up every morning early. I decided that I would get up every morning early and write, which is my way of feeding myself. I know that it also can be interpreted as a form of output, but really it's something I do for myself. Writing every day. I started out by saying that I would write an hour a day, but I really love it. So it usually is more than that. But let's just say that I write an hour or two a day. I get up at 5, I write from 5 to 7. I'm a morning person, so I just don't think 5 is all that painful, but also it can be at any time of the day. It can be before, once everyone has gone to bed. But I just was astounded at how quickly 2 hours of writing a day accumulated into these folders that I had everywhere. And I was like, I think maybe if people are reading them online, I should be making them available instead of just keeping them as my own files. And that's how I started writing books. But the thing that shocked me, that really, really shocked me, was how fast a little every day became a lot over the year and a lot over 2 years. And I realized that anything that we do a little bit of compounds, it accumulates, and it becomes our life. It becomes our body of work.
Isn't that incredible? And you said so many things that I want to follow up on there. One of them was this idea that the writing, you didn't do it for someone else. Let's talk about that. The genesis of the writing for you came from where? It came from within?
Yeah. So I have to say, I think that there, as you probably know, there's 2 kinds of motivation. There's externally and internally motivated people. And there's no right or wrong. It's just depends. Like, I have a friend who wanted to get fit and he couldn't do it, and he couldn't do it. And then he told a group of friends that he was going to get fit, and they all started exercising together. And it was a life-changing moment for him, where he was like, oh, I'm externally motivated. If I promised other people that I would show up at the gym, then I do, right? So I'm decidedly 100% internally motivated. It's like, it's always been who I am. If I decide to do something, I follow through and I do it for myself. So I think that is related to the fact that I write for me. I said I would, and that's what I do. But also it brings me enormous amounts of pleasure. Like I said, it makes me feel very connected to myself. Sometimes I have this feeling, as a lot of people who create, I mean, whether they create well or not, whether I'm a good writer or not, sometimes I have this feeling like that I'm a tool for someone else to write through. Like, I feel connected to something bigger than me, which I find very beautiful. It's like the best part of my day. I don't feel that every day, but I feel it quite frequently. And I feel like the more disciplined I am, the more frequently I feel that. And then what I used to do was write in journals and then put them in drawers and forget about them, and no one would ever see them. And one day someone recommended that I post things that I was writing. They were like, Dushka, you should post this. This would be so useful.
Yeah.
And I started posting them on Quora, basically on social media. And I discovered this incredible thing, which was that writing, which usually isolated me from the people that I loved, like a lot of the people that I love and a lot of the relationships that I have been in, people have said, when you write, you shut me out, like you isolate yourself. And for the first time ever, writing was also a form of connection. It was connecting me to other people, not just me shutting myself out. So when you write, you need a lot of silence. You need a lot of time. For me, it's like that. But for people around me, they're like, Dushka, you've been writing 4 hours, like come for breakfast or whatever.
So I want to ask, I've not heard you say that in all of our conversations before, that there was a time when, tell us more about that. Writing was perceived by the people around you as a way that you isolated yourself?
Yeah. So my parents were both writers, right? So in my house, I had never experienced someone telling me that writing was shutting them out. But when I started living with someone, when I was in a relationship and I started living with someone, I would write, and a Saturday I would write, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 hours. And for me, it was like minutes. And the person that I was living with was like, I am hungry, or whatever, like we haven't had breakfast, and there was always like a tension between me spending time writing, or like basically me spending time with myself, which I think is like the battle of all introverts, is like I need a lot of time to myself, and spending time with others. And the Quora, basically the advent of writing on a computer and social media, which didn't exist when I started writing. I'm not that old, but it didn't exist. The experience of using it as a form of the experience of it becoming a way to connect came after. So I could write for myself and always have, and those journals ended up in drawers. But the fact that now it connects me to others, I think astounds me, and is pretty much the most beautiful thing that has ever happened to me. The fact that this thing that I do for myself is also what connects me to so many people, and where so many people say the thing that hurt you, or that you suffered through, or like the grief that you felt, or the breakup, or whatever it was, reading through what you did has helped me. And I think to myself, I'm so happy that I can share something that I went through that other people find useful, because otherwise I would still write it, but it would be in a drawer.
So many things in what you just said that we have to pursue. I've noted 3 of them.
I'm ready, Dan.
Okay, well, and in no particular order, and this may be overwhelming, but I'm going to throw all 3 right back at you. And I noted them here. You've written 9,000 essays. You write every day. Where do you get the ideas to write them? Because I automatically hear myself saying, yeah, I could be disciplined and I could write every day, but what in the hell would I write about after I've done 4, for example?
Okay, so let me tackle that first.
Yeah.
So 2 places. One is I go through something, I discover something that would have made me suffer less. And I'm like, why didn't anybody tell me this? And I write it down, and that becomes an idea for something to write about. Like self-compassion is an example. Like I go through something hard and I'm like, how could I have been so stupid? I can't believe that I didn't see that coming. And then a friend will say, you never talk to your friends that way. And I'm like, oh my God, now I understand what self-compassion is. I need to write about that. So that's one way that I think of how to write. So anything that makes me suffer less or that I find beautiful gets written. And the second way is that Quora is a big fat site with writing prompts. People ask questions and I'm like, I never really thought to write about that, but I know the answer to that. Or at least I know my answer to that. I should be sharing that. So that's another reason why I love writing for this beautiful place of questions and answers, because if you put millions of people together, which are the number of users on Quora, and you have all of them ask questions, my sense is that I'll never run out of things to write about.
Wow. Okay. Just a quick note. You and I have mentioned Quora several times. I don't know how many people online are familiar with it. You should be. Quora, we've written it down here, Quora.com. Dushka, just for 30 seconds, just because it's a really interesting aside, tell us what Quora is for anybody who's not familiar.
Yeah, it's a question and answer site, and you go and you are able to ask any question or answer any question, and people upvote or downvote the questions, and the ones that are most upvoted are the ones that you see first.
And you can find true experts in any field on Quora is the idea, right?
Yeah, you can find true experts, and you also find, as with anything human, people who have no idea what they're talking about and answer questions, and they either get downvoted or they get upvoted because they're being funny. Like it's a very human place with all its beauty and ridiculousness.
Okay, so playing that back, thank you for that side note. I just wanted to call it out. Ideas, brilliant. You want to write about anything that helps you suffer less, asking yourself, why didn't I know that before? You gave us an example. Give us another example, if you could. What is something that maybe that even appears in your newest book that would have been an answer you wish you'd known when you were little?
Yeah, so I grew up believing that if I love you, I'm supposed to know what you want. So what I'm demanding of myself is my ability to read minds. Do you know how impossible that is? It is an impossible demand. So I've stumbled upon the notion that instead of just knowing, I could ask you. And I'm like, why didn't anybody tell me that I could just ask? Why have I spent so much time and energy trying to just know? Trying to just know is incredibly unhealthy. It's really unhealthy for relationships, because every time I assume something about you, I can't see you, because I think that what I'm assuming is actually what you want. It impedes me to actually see you. So in an effort to guess you, I am making you up. And I wish someone had told me that. So that is another example of something that I wish someone had told me. And by the way, I wrote a whole book called Things I Wish Someone Had Told Me. So I have an infinite list of things that somehow everybody knows except for me.
People could write books about that.
People could write books.
And they have.
And I have.
Okay, so thank you. And question number 2 that emerged from what you were sharing with us a moment ago was, you had mentioned that you didn't know in your writing that would also often isolate you from the people that were around you. That sounds to me a little bit like this notion of going into flow, where you are doing something that you have such connection to that you're unaware of your surroundings. Tell us a little bit about that experience of realizing of the writing that isolated you and realizing that it was isolating you. And I hate to be judgmental, but now do you think that's good or bad, or it is just what it is? Tell us about that.
Well, I want to preface this by saying that I don't think being in flow necessarily means that you are good to like, you don't have to be like mega talented to feel this.
Mhm.
Like it's not a value judgment. This is just what happens to me. So if I am left to my own devices with a notebook and a pen, and not a pen because I don't use pens, but a notebook or a pencil or a computer or my phone, like if I'm left to my own devices on any given day, I will just write for as long as I can. For as I don't ever feel like I'm tired or it's been too long. Like I can just write endlessly, and especially if I have prompts or ideas. But if you were to drop me somewhere and say, I'm just going to leave you here for 2 or 3 days, if there were to be, for example, a global pandemic that would require that I self-isolate, I would come out 6 months later pretty happy with the fact that I haven't had to do anything other than sit in my apartment and write. So I love writing, even when I'm only like not particularly inspired. It's just like what I do. I love it. I love words. I love stringing them together. I love, this sounds maybe a little bit egocentric, and I don't mean it that way, but I just really like my own company.
Mhm.
I like to see what I write, and I surprise myself. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that I thought that. Like, it's just interesting to me to write. And when I feel in flow, which is when I feel like, oh my God, somebody else wrote that. It's a very beautiful feeling, and it takes a very long time. And if there's people around me that want to spend time with me or want to do things with me, I think that I can be very difficult to live with.
So I want to ask something about that. Holy smoke. I mean, Dushka, this is incredible. I want to ask you, I'm picking out of the things you say, things that I'm hearing you are very passionate about, and things that resonate in my own mind by me wanting to say, ooh, yeah, I get it. One of them is, you mentioned that you could write all day.
Yep.
Is writing for you the way that you discover the shape of your idea? And this is a false dichotomy, but it might be interesting. Is writing the way by which you discover the shape of your idea, or do you already know what you're going to write and then just execute it?
Yeah, I understand. I think mostly the second. I think
Okay.
mostly I already know what I want to write, and I just write. I have never, well, seldom. I have seldom like written an outline, or
Mhm.
I think this is what I want to write, and then it just sort of like comes out, and I write it. And the whole process, people are like, you bleed at the keyboard. Like, I've never felt that in my life. It's never been a painful process for me.
Mhm.
It's never been frustrating or painful. I've never felt writer's block. I've never felt like to write well, you have to suffer. I've never felt any of that. It's just pure joy for me. It always has been. And also, there are a lot of things that I sort of like kind of know what I want to say. And then when I'm actually writing it, I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I never thought of it exactly in that way. So I think that in my experience, there is a stranger inside of all of us.
Yeah.
And if we listen to him or her, and through what we create, we get to know someone pretty fantastic. And I think that that is true for every person.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of things that I can do to fall out of touch with that person. And there's a lot of things that I can do to fall in touch with that person. And one of the things that I need to do to be in touch with that person is spend time alone so I can hear her. And to me, it's writing, but I think it's through spending time alone and through creating. And I don't mean like days alone or anything like that. I don't mean like become a hermit or anything. I just mean we need some time alone because the world is a very noisy place and we can't hear ourselves.
When you're writing, I'm going to play back what I think you heard, what I think you said, and tell me if I got it right. It's as if you're having a conversation with yourself. Are you talking to, like, almost as if you're talking to another voice within you? What does that feel like?
Oh, okay, I'm going to tell you what it feels like, but I'm very worried that this conversation is getting increasingly stranger, but I'm going to tell you.
I love strange conversations.
Great. I live with many voices in my head all the time. I hear, and they're not, so for example, I have my anxiety and my self-doubt and my insecurity and my ego and my all of these voices are always talking to me. And there is one master voice. There is one conductor of all of these voices. So as I go through my day, the chatter is very distracting. So like right now I'm talking to you and I hear someone saying, how is this going to sound to other people? Or another voice saying, what are people going to think of me, or whatever, like all of these voices. So there's one voice that is master command, central command, which I think is me. So when I'm writing, central command is the only voice that I can hear. Writing is the only time that I am not managing a chatter inside my head. I am only listening to one person.
Wow. And she or he is working
Definitely
with you. She okay.
Yeah.
Is working with you to crystallize that idea to get it nailed down. Is that right?
No, she is me. We are one.
Okay. Are you talking to her, or is it just that's you?
I think a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I think it's me, but also she knows what she wants me to do.
Okay.
And by the way, she's the one that I hear when I make like big decisions, or the one that I hear where I'm about to make a questionable decision. She's like, oh, that's a really bad decision. And
don't do it, girl.
And I'm like, shush, leave us alone.
And you call her central command, right?
I call her central command. Yes.
Do you think everybody has a central command?
Yes.
Yes.
I think maybe we forget how to listen, but yes.
Well, I can tell you from my own experience that there's absolutely a central command, and central command, I'm just going to play back a similar experience I've had to what you've just shared with you about writing. And it comes to me when I am painting, more even than when I am drawing, say, something for business, which many Napkin Academy people have done along with me, where we have a story that we need to unpack and we try to draw it out. To me, something about painting enables that conversation to take place that does feel more like with central command. I feel like I hear you on that one.
So let me just tie this back. If people are out there saying, out in the world saying, I feel lost, I don't know what my purpose is, why am I here? All of these questions you have the answers to if you slow down and spend time alone and create something. And that is why this is my 20-minute answer to your original question. What is creativity, and why should we be concerned with it? And I think creativity can be anything. It can be planting things. It can be, tending to your garden, or making a cake, or making cookies, or raising your kid. Anything that involves making something out of nothing is a form of creation. And I think we are all creative. And I think that if we tap into the creative person inside of us, we quiet our existential angst.
Wow. If we use creativity to tap into the voices inside of us, we can minimize our existential angst. Holy moly. Okay, Dushka, we've talked about this. There's one question about creativity I want to ask, and then I do want to shift to where has been the focus of your, and to some degree, my creativity over the last 6 months, i.e. the new book and relationships. Before we get there, though, you've alluded to it, but to the degree that you can, as specifically as you can, what has worked for you in terms of saying, I have a busy life. I want to be creative, but I don't have time to be creative. How can we find the time anyway for anybody?
Okay, so the first thing I want to say is I do not have time to not be creative.
Huh?
I don't. I feel like everything else would be a tangle if I didn't get things out of my system at the start of the day. But I also think that we have time for a lot of things. We have time to watch TV. We have time to listen to music. We have time to hang out with people we don't really like. We have time to hang out with people that we're not really interested in. We have time for everything. I think that if we don't have time to be creative, is because we are afraid. And that is the common reason why people don't create, because it's really scary to give yourself into central command. It's extremely scary to create something. I mean, what if I create something that comes from my heart and nobody likes it?
Yeah.
What if it betrays the fact that I'm just like not that interesting or not very good? Like it's very, very, very scary. And what I say is that if you take the time to get to know yourself, everything is better and just more valuable and more wonderful. And the only time I have ever said I don't have time for something is because I'm scared to do it.
Wow. And carve out that little bit. You can find time to do it. We have Pedram, who has a question. I'm just going to read it to you, Dushka, because it's absolutely relevant to exactly what you said. Of the types of writing that you'd identified, the writing that you do kind of for someone else, or you realize someone else is reading it, and the writing you do for yourself, do you have a preference for which one you prefer to do? Writing just for yourself, or writing knowing that it's going to go to someone else? Is there a difference for you?
I consider them indistinguishable because in order for, so if I'm going to give you another example of something I wish someone had told me. Did you know that when you really love someone and you say no to them, it doesn't mean you don't love them? It's just a boundary. It doesn't mean you don't love them. It's okay to say no to someone you love. Why didn't anybody tell me that? Why was I always feeling completely overextended with an inability to say no because all I wanted was for them to feel loved? That is incredible to me. And boundaries are the cornerstone of healthy relationships. I had no idea. No one ever told me what a boundary was. So you know what I want to do with that knowledge? I want to write it down so I don't forget it. So that's for me. And then I want to write it down so that you know what a boundary is, and that's for you. So there's no difference. It's for us.
And now that you have, through Quora and other forms of writing, the ability to get feedback from people, how does that impact your feeling of the writing, if at all?
Yeah. So the feedback that I get is, as you and I have discussed, is incredibly broad. From this is the most stupid thing I've ever read in my life, and you're an idiot, and you should get off Quora, to you have changed my life, and I love you. And I think that you learn to you learn to distinguish what you should be listening to and what you shouldn't be listening to. But at the end of the day, because I write for myself, if somebody finds something really helpful, I'm very happy. And if someone thinks I'm an idiot, I'm sorry. But neither one of them really influences what I deem interesting to write about.
So let's take that as an opportunity to shift now to part 2 of this conversation. I know this because for the past year plus, and in particular, in a more focused way for the last 6 months, you have been writing on the topic of relationships. And I know that because each day you share with me what you're writing, and then I have the ability to create illustrations because a new book has been created. So let's talk a little bit about why did you choose to write a book about relationships? And while you do that, I'm going to share my screen so people can see what we're talking about, okay?
Yes, but I also want to ask you questions, Dan.
Okay.
So don't let me forget that.
You will not. I will not let you forget that.
In an effort to answer your questions, I'm getting carried away, and I don't want people to miss out on the things I want you to talk about.
Okay. So I don't think you're getting carried away at all. I think it's fantastic. And we've used creativity and little bits at a time. You've created this new thing, this new book about relationships. And here's the cover. And you guys can see my screen okay, right?
I just want to say that this is the most beautiful, adorable cover I've ever seen. And you created it, Dan. Look at them.
And I created it because, again, your writing I find incredibly inspiring as a way to one of the creative things that I love, which is rapid sketching, rapid drawing.
Dan, can you tell us more about how you come up with a sense of what to draw?
Yeah. And it goes back, like many people who are on this call, or many people who want to be or are aspiring to be creative, there are many things that we do. And I can speak for myself and say that I am creative in multiple ways. I like to draw quickly, like the things that are on the whiteboard here, because back to when I was asking you, Dushka, does writing help you discover what's already in your head? And you said, in a way, you have the conversation with central command. The way that I have a conversation with my own central command and therefore understand what is going on in my head, more often than not, is drawing. So I love drawing. There is a modified version of the drawing that I do, which is painting. Painting, it's a very similar practice, but the act of it is a little different because it's more epic for me. Painting simply requires going in deeper. But to answer your question, drawing quickly is a joy for me. Figuring out what to draw is easy when I am reading your essays, because your essays, often based on the questions that you see on Quora, all the things that we've been talking about, to me, most of your essays have within them a verbal description of what I find to be a visual idea or a visual analogy. So for example, here is a Quora question that popped up, I believe it was yesterday, that you answered. And the question was, What is something that seems like a waste of time, but actually isn't? That's not a question I answered. That's a question you answered. Can you tell us a little bit about why you picked that question and why you chose to answer it? And then I'll pick up from there and show what I drew and how.
Yeah, I picked it because I don't believe that there is such a thing as a waste of time. I think that the notion of wasting time is very, I don't know how people would feel that something would be a waste of time. So it always calls my attention. And I was like, what is the time where I feel, oh my God, this is such a waste of time? And I was like, when I'm bored. So I need to write about how not even being bored is a waste of time. And that's how I was like, that is an attractive question, because it feels a little like a challenge.
And so to what you had asked me, you saw that question, and through the process you've just described, you were motivated to answer it. And then through talking to Central Command within Dushka land, all the voices, you came up with this idea that the thing that we often feel is a waste of time, but you believe is not, is boredom. And you wrote that down. And you wrote it in a way that when I read it, and then you passed it along to me and said, this is the post, this is the question on Quora that I'm going to do today. If you want to illustrate it, here's what I've written. And by the way, for those of you that are interested in the process by which I create the illustrations for Dushka, that is always it. It always comes from Dushka sharing with me what she has written, and then I'm essentially reacting to that. So in the case of, yeah.
Just to round it out and bring it to the original subject, all of this, me getting up, writing, me sending you the drawing, you drawing it, all of this happens in a little bit of time. And the reason why we have collaborated on 4 books already is because that has been adding up all of the little bits of time. So basically what we are showing is how much you can actually do in maybe half an hour in the morning, because I write for a couple of hours or for a long bit of time, but in the day in, day out of life, I write this whole thing of me getting up, choosing an answer, writing it down, sending it to you, you coming up with a drawing and me posting it. All of this happens in less than 45 minutes. So
yeah.
If you're setting aside the time and getting up in the morning with an intention to write and looking for a question with an intent to write an answer, all of this from the beginning of the pouring the cup of coffee to the output of the question with the answer, we're talking about an hour at most. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. And thank you as well for putting this back in the context of today's session. How do little drops carve giant canyons, one at a time? And the amount of time I typically have in my day, and like everybody, we're very, very busy. So the time that I allocate is usually about 10 to 15 minutes to make the drawings, which is why I do them very light and I just do them on the whiteboard. And for example, here's exactly what took place yesterday in the morning. You sent me the question and you sent me your answer, and I read the answer, and the answer, as you pointed out, was boredom. Boredom seems to be something we all want to avoid, and yet it is one of the times in which our best ideas can come to pass, because we're not doing anything else, because we're bored. So reading that, and those are your words, as I was reading it, I automatically saw someone who's this kind of archetypal Dushka character just being bored.
Is it the hair, Dan?
It's the hair. It's the hair and the multiple expressions, and just thinking of nothing. And then it dawned on me that the longer this character sat there thinking of nothing and just letting the mind be blank, the little kernel of an idea would appear. And then I thought, well, what would be the next thing? Well, then as that person, I just pictured myself. I'm lying on the table and I'm bored and I'm doing this. With each turn of the head, the idea becomes a little bit bigger. So now it's like a little bit of a spark. And now she is starting to wake up with one eye kind of looking up. And there's the little bit of a flame. And then once that flame takes root, oh my gosh, I'm up here. It's total flame, which then, and people who don't know Dushka can see Dushka's energy level here. This is typically what happens. We've seen it, is from quiet all of the sudden to running around metaphorically with your hair on fire. And the beauty of it from the illustration perspective is the hair and the hair on fire become the same thing. So the drawing is, what is the central visual story that is embedded either specifically in the words that you've written or in the analogy that you're writing about. Does that make sense where it comes from?
Yeah. And how has drawing something every day, like this quickly, changed your own work?
What an
If
incredible question. I used to believe, to a far greater degree than I do now, in the epic nature of creativity, like epic, EPIC, like creativity as a giant epic undertaking, that a true creative journey is a journey with ups and downs, and it goes on for a long time. And maybe you do have to bleed on the keyboard. Maybe you do have to sweat blood or sweat paint or whatever it is. I don't know where that idea came from, but what I have learned in doing the drawings every day with you over these last couple of years is creativity, the kind that really is having an impact on me, is not epic. It is the little bits at a time, and it has changed my approach towards it.
And I hope that everyone here is listening to that, because the notion that it has to be big, or that it has to be perfect, or that it has to be that it has to part the waters is what makes people feel like they can't do it. So a little tiny bit at a time also refers to the fact that it's not just 10 minutes or 15 minutes or an hour a day, but it doesn't have to be grand. It can just be. And that, I think, makes it a lot more accessible. And it means that everyone can do it, because nothing that we do here takes a long time, or is incredibly complicated, or is like, parting the waters of any ocean. It's just staying at it. And some days I look at the drawing and I look at the writing and I'm like, wow, this is like great. And some days I'm like, that was just a Wednesday. It doesn't matter. What matters is the output and the connection with ourselves.
And there's a reframing, Dushka, I want to add in there. This is not to say that epic stories and epic blockbuster movies and fantastically elaborate novels are not, those are the output. We can guarantee this because we know many people who have made these things. Those giant epic stories, if that's what you choose to create, are still literally made one drop at a time. Whether you're J.R.R. Tolkien and you're writing The Lord of the Rings, thousands of pages, every part of that comes from a little bit at a time, and then keeping it up.
Yeah, and in answer to the question, I'm looking at the Q&A thing here, and Joven, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, says the fact that I said this happens only in a short time can be an illusion, because this brevity of action has happened only after going through the long tail, the long practice to make it too perfect, to making it sound simple. And I think that's a great point. But I also think that it's a circle, right? Because you do something and you do it quick, and it doesn't have to be epic, and you put it out, and sometimes it's fantastic. So sometimes it's like objectively really good, and sometimes it's just a Tuesday. But then as you add the hours over years, suddenly you're like, I've gotten a whole lot of practice. Yeah. Like, practice doesn't make perfect, because nothing makes perfect, but I've gotten better. We've gotten better. This has become better. So I think that on top of the fact that it's easy, and on top of the fact that it's discipline and connects you with yourself, I also think you're automatically getting better at whatever thing you're getting up early in the morning to do. And I think that matters. And that would be my answer to Joven.
Perfect. And I want to shift that now. Dushka, I'm going to share the screen one more time, because I want to get back to sharing our cover of our book, because I do want to take a moment and talk about this book in particular. So an outcome of creativity that has been largely driven by you, and I've had an opportunity to go along on the way, has been this book. Would you please tell us just a little bit about what is Please Don't Blame Love? What is a relationship handbook? And why did you choose to write this? And then we'll read some excerpts from it. But first of all, tell us about, where did this book come from?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that I think relationships are the most fascinating thing. They fascinate me. I'm fascinated why people fall in love, why I fall in love with someone and not the person that I thought would be a really good idea to fall in love with, why I fall in love with the wrong person, why people cheat on each other. Just everything about relationships has been a point of fascination for me for my whole life. And that's the first, like, it's just always been something I've been fascinated by. And the second point is that I've always been, or considered myself to be, really bad at relationships. Like I've always been just this relationship catastrophe kind of a person. And I very little by little discovered that a lot of things that I knew and that I thought I knew about relationships was not right. And that relationships are a skill that you can learn. And I'm like, why didn't anybody tell me this? I could have been doing this differently all along. I did not have to believe in soulmates if they don't exist. I did not have to believe in happily ever after. I didn't have to go looking for my perfect half. Like, though none of those things exist. And relationships are even more wonderful that they could ever be in a fairy tale. Why? Why didn't anybody ever tell me this? So as I discovered that relationships were a skill, and as I discovered that we were all a victim of pop culture and fairy tales, or as Anais Nin once said, we have been poisoned by fairy tales, I decided that a lot of people could use the things that I have learned to make my relationships better, because I think relationships are the meaning of life. And I think that they, more than any other factor in our life, relationships, if you have a good relationship, you have a good life. So I wrote this book of a collection of things I wish someone had told me about relationships, because I wanted to get better at them, because getting better at relationships means I get better at life and become happier. And I don't know if I answered all your questions, but that's why I put this book together, because I needed it.
Why is it called Please Don't Blame Love?
Because it's not love's fault that we do it so wrong. Love is sitting there all perfect and lovely, and we do everything wrong, and then we're like, love sucks. Well, it's not love's fault. It's not love's fault if you don't know what a boundary is, you know? There's an essay that I think you're going to read because you really liked it that has the please don't blame love in it. So you'll read it and it will become clear. But love is wonderful. So if relationships aren't going well, it's really not love's fault.
Okay, so we're going to shift to this. Can you believe that we're already only 10 minutes left to go in this whole session? Isn't that crazy? And yes. I thank everybody who has hung with us. We have some questions coming in. At the same time, here's what I'm going to say. We're going to take the next 6 minutes, Dushka and I, and we're going to walk you through a little bit of the structure of this book because I think it's interesting. And then, Dushka, I'm going to ask you to read 2 or 3 of your favorite essays, all of which I have ready here on the screen. But before we do, may I take just a moment and talk a little bit about the structure of the book? Because I do believe in structure. I think it's very important.
Yes.
And so the way the book, Please Don't Blame Love, is structured is it's in 2 parts. Part 1 is something that, in this notion of relationships being a skill, Dushka, I have learned from you or heard from you, which that every relationship starts with yourself. And that if you're going to have a good relationship with someone else, you better have a good relationship with yourself. So these first chapters are on how we can learn to have a better relationship with ourselves. And then the second part is the work then that we do with our significant other. Right?
Yes, exactly.
Given that, there are a series of essays here. Dushka, I'm going to share them on the screen. I would love it if you would just read us in your own words a couple of them. Let me show you what we have just as a reminder. We had relinquish. Yep. We had the 3 things.
Yep.
Assumptions or questions. Is love a social construct? Please don't blame. So do you want to just take it from the top?
Yep.
Okay, go.
This is called Relinquish That Search, and I love your drawing. It's exactly how I feel when I have relinquished the search. There are 2 beliefs that will guarantee increasing unhappiness. The first is that someone else can make you whole. The second is that things are better somewhere else. This is how you implant a permanent sense of restlessness in your delicate ecosystem. This is how all you learn to do is run. Relinquish every insatiable, desperate search. Stop running. Let the dust settle. Land here. Cultivate here. Nurture here. Care for here. Here is where it's at. Discover this now, or you risk finding out you've lost all the things you didn't realize you already had.
Wow. We often talk about being mindful of the present moment, being aware of what we have now. To me, this reads as a validation of that notion. Yes?
Yes, exactly.
All right.
All right.
Tell us about 3 things, Dushka.
In my own relationships, I have learned 3 things that have proven extremely useful to me and that have contributed greatly to my satisfaction and my happiness. I'm going to share them with you here, hoping they do the same for you. The first thing is to identify what I want and ask for it. Waiting for someone to do something for me, hoping they will just know that I want it, is like expecting someone else to read my mind. Asking for what I want might sound like, I would love to hear you say you love me. Or, can we kiss for 2 minutes? Can you give me a hug? I have found that when people know what I want, I am more likely to get it. This protects me from feeling disappointment or disenchantment. The second thing I've learned is that people don't love me the way I want them to love me. They love me the way they can. I cannot force the kind of love I want. I cannot measure their love with measuring tools meant to measure my kind of love. It's entirely possible for someone to never say they love me and for them to love me very much. And yes, there is a duality here, my ability to be clear on what I want and my ability to be elastic about what I get. Because I can exercise clarity, but I can't change you. In order for love to work, I have to accept, to love who and how you love. It is very beautiful to be loved 1,000 different ways instead of just my way. The third thing I've learned is that I will never know why people do what they do. Asking why they do it is fruitless and keeps me stuck in a powerless infinite loop. My rule is that whenever I stand there wondering why someone is doing what they do, I have to figure out how to turn the question back to me. Why? Why doesn't he tell me he loves me? Becomes, why did I choose a man who won't say he loves me when there are plenty of other men who will? And he will not say he loves me. Is this a deal breaker or something I can live with? It's the greatest gift, I think, to exist in that peaceful place where you are loved for exactly what you can give and for exactly who you are.
Isn't that remarkable? I mean, I'm asking that out into the clouds for everybody. And here's what I would do with this. I have to do it, Dushka. I have to do it. This is how, to me, drawings, and Pedram, we have the question you're asking, do drawings clean up the writing? We can't answer. I can't answer that. I would say that they complement it. And here I have to do it, Dushka. Here's what happens. This essay is entitled 3 Things. And I go through, because you've led me to say there are 3 things. I, in my mind, my visual mind, my whiteboard mind, go and start to build the tripod, the triangle of the 3 things. And the first thing is identify what I want and ask for it. The second thing is people don't love me the way I want them to. They love me the way they can. And the third thing is I never know why people do what they do. So I should ask the question back to myself. So here we've got 1, and here we've got 2, and here we've got 3. And Pedram and others who are asking, what is the difference between the writing and the drawing? And there was an embedded question, someone, is it better to hire a professional illustrator? Well, no. This is that for me and for those who are visual, this act that I've just described of taking a piece of beautiful text, like the one that Dushka has given us, and reading it through saying, what does my visual mind pull out of this, and making the drawing of that is the magic that we have for ourselves.
Well, my answer to Pedram's very good question would be like dancing. Like, can you dance alone or can you dance with another person? Is it better if there's a lone dancer on stage or if 2 people are dancing? And my answer is a lone dancer on stage is great, but 2 people dancing is beautiful. Mm-hmm. And having one person do the writing and another person do the drawing is like a waltz and not like a solo dance, right? It depends. I think that they yield different things. And then to Jovin's question, why is it difficult for people to achieve consistency and persistence? I think my answer would be because we want big things fast. What we want is, oh, I'm not happy with my life, so I'm going to take a year off and go to Europe and change my life. Like, it's like the fact that very big things happen out of little things means that you have to have one quality that none of us have, and that is patience. Wait for it. Do little by little. Mm-hmm. And if we manage to be patient, and we basically the speed at which we get what we want is slow, and therefore it is not very popular, but it is nevertheless incredibly powerful. Sorry to jump over you, Dan, but it was just there, and when I read it, it gave me the same impulse that I have when I see a Quora thing, where I'm like, I have to write this. I have to answer. Little bit
of what we just saw right here. A little bit of hair on fire. This is how it works, and it's lovely. Okay. Hey, Dushka, I have a question for you. Which is better, assumptions or questions?
Yeah. Here we go. Assumptions come from me, my interpretation. As such, they are a reflection of my experiences, my biases, my prejudice, and my stories. They are about me, not about another person. And yet I use them to decode, understand, or jump to conclusions about somebody else. If I am stopping at my own interpretation, this is an impediment to me getting to know another person. I can't get to know someone else if all I see is me. It's hard for another person to feel seen or understood if my conclusions come from me. Every assumption is a missed connection. Assumptions are an excellent way to live life inside of the stories that I fabricate. Inside the story, I live in the past instead of taking in new information. I blame instead of taking responsibility. I create distractions and obstacles that I don't know exist. I experience anger or stress over things that never took place. There's a muscle that gets a workout when I go through the exercise of finding out what I want to know. I ask, and every time I do, I get better at communicating. Conversely, assumptions turn making assumptions into a habit. It's better to ask so many questions. Even then I think I know. Even then I think I should know. Even when the other person thinks I should know. It's so much clearer, so much fresher, so much easier out here, outside the stale air of my own recycled stories.
Oh my God, it's beautiful. And then, thank you. And then I get to take the drawing and interpret what I have seen in your writing. And in this particular case, just to show you, to show everyone, what I got from reading Dushka's post, there are two people and they are trying to connect. And the one who is assuming is staying all the time within his or her stale air and not actually being able to see the other one. And the way to break that is, instead of asking yourself, what does this person mean? You simply ask them. And it's through the constant going back and forth that you actually both figure out what you want and what you want from each other. Dushka, we are at time. You know what we're going to do? We're going to skip over the rest of these because all of them are available to other people. Because here's what we're going to do in the last minute. We have some holiday gifts for people. Dushka, what do we have available for people today?
Yep. So you and I have collaborated on 4 books.
Mm-hmm.
The first 3 are The Love of Your Life is You, Demote Yourself, and For All I Know. Those 3 books, you created the covers and illustrated them, and they are available for free on Amazon for free download only today. So if you want them, you can go download them. We would provide links, but the link varies per country. So wherever you are, go to Amazon, write my name in the Amazon search window and enter these books, and you will be able to download the e-versions for free. Please Don't Blame Love is available as of today. And in paperback. I don't know if the e-version is available, but this is not available for free, just the first 3. So you can go take a look at it and maybe buy it, and that would be great. And then take a look at Napkin Academy, and I will let Dan explain to you what that is.
Okay.
And you have 1 minute, Dan.
1 minute, and then we're going to take a final question from Brian as our exit tune as we go. Do you see the question from Brian, Dushka? So read through it and prepare. I think it's a beautiful question coming from Brian. You see it there?
No, but you can explain.
I'll read it. If for those of you who've been with us this morning or this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are, and have enjoyed it, I would like to invite you to join on a more permanent basis the Napkin Academy. If you go to napkinacademy.com, if you're not already an associate or a member now, you can access every single one of the pre-recorded courses that myself and Debbie and Debbie's partner Sherry have also created on applied visual thinking. All of them are available, and you get to join us live every month for an hour like this, where we'll often have a special guest, by joining in the Napkin Unlimited program. So that's my plug for Napkin Academy if you want more of this. And as we wrap this up, we want to thank you. And the question from Brian goes like this. Dushka, you ready? And this will be our walkout song.
Yes.
Brian asks the following: how do you see humility as a factor in accomplishing big things through small increments? Dushka, what do you think?
I think a lot of people like big, huge steps to accomplish big, huge things. And that is not always how it works. Sometimes it works with small steps. I was just talking to a friend. I went to the doctor and had some health issues, and the doctor was like, please don't do anything huge. Please take small steps and just eat better and walk every day, and you will find your way to health. So I would relate it less to humility and more to discipline, just the day in, day out of small steps, accomplish big things, but also small steps stick. And they work. They work for health, and they work for creativity, and they work for anything that you have ever found daunting can be accomplished by doing a little bit at a time.
Including even love.
Including even loving well. Yes.
A little bit at a time.
A little bit at a time.
Dushka, thank you so much for giving us another hour of your time on Napkin Academy this morning. It has been a complete pleasure to get to share this and talk with you and draw with you. Any closing thoughts? And then we'll say bye-bye.
Yeah, I think there is no happily ever after. But I think that when you learn how to do relationships well, you come pretty darn close.
Perfect. Couldn't say anything better than that. Happy holidays, everyone, wherever you are. I hope to see you in the coming year, and I wish you all the very, very best. Thank you, Dushka. Thank you all.
Bye. Thank you, Dan. Bye.
Bye.